island of Puerto Rico is filled with stories. Stories of its discovery, its history, culture, how it became known as La Isla de Encanto, the Island of Enchantment. Most boast of its splendor and beauty, but hidden deep within this slice of paradise, there's a dark story. A story of pain, of struggle. A story that's plagued this island and its people for years.
Puerto Rico is going to take a direct hit late tonight and tomorrow from as catastrophic a hurricane as I could imagine.
This could be a catastrophe for the island. It's life-threatening for people.
The Category 4 storm made landfall on the Caribbean island as one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit Puerto Rico.
Hurricane Maria, 7:13 a.m. I have no idea what intensity these winds might be.
Record-breaking rainfall flooded homes across the island. Winds topped 115 miles per hour.
We're getting unofficial reports of 3 feet of rain across Puerto Rico, and the power outages remain devastating. The damage is incredible, and now the storm
I can say with reasonable certainty that in modern history there has never been a natural disaster that has so negatively impacted so many people.
The historic storm changed the lives of more than 3 million Puerto Ricans then, and still continues to do so even today.
SA exigen que el equipaje esté supervisado en todo momento.
Oh, we made it to San Juan. This is day 1 of what I really hope is going to be an eye-opening experience. I think it'll be pretty emotional too to see what the island really looks like today compared to what it did 5 years ago.
Despite the horror it's seen, millions of people still visit Puerto Rico every year for its beauty and tropical climate. But life on the U.S. territory today is defined by so much more.
Gosh, it's been, 3 years since I've been in Puerto Rico, and just looking around, it already brings back all the memories of my family, my childhood. It's just so beautiful here. It is one of my favorite places.
But this is hard to see personally, because this was home for me. I was born in San Juan. That's me. I spent my childhood on the island. That's my family, many of them who still live here, and who I try to visit as often as I can. We know living in Puerto Rico isn't easy. There are still life-changing, life-threatening issues happening here that are hard to understand, hard to believe, are still a problem.
As you drive through the streets of San Juan, which is the capital city here in Puerto Rico, you'll get an idea. You'll notice there are dozens of buildings and homes that are either still abandoned or just look a mess after 5 years.
But there are towns, areas where Hurricane Maria packed an even bigger, more devastating punch. Miriam Fantanusi sees the scars of that monster storm every time she looks up. Hurricane Maria made landfall through Yabucoa, a town where many, like Miriam, live in extreme poverty. Massive trees collapsed above her, sending pieces of her roof crashing down. To the point where we're standing, there was no roof. They put these metal sheets on top to give them some kind of cover from all the elements here. She says that area outside is where she takes a shower. That's where she washes clothes. Electricity is scarce. Miriam says there's no running water. She's forced to walk several blocks to a public water pump or a nearby river. And yet, for what she does have left, knowing soon that might change too. She just said one more hurricane and she's not sure she's going to have a home. But the extent of Hurricane Maria's impact wasn't just physical damage. Hurricane Maria was the deadliest U.S. disaster in 100 years, killing more than 3,000 people. Dozens during the cyclone's fury, but many more in the days, weeks, and months that followed, when some Puerto Ricans struggled to find water, food. Millions left without power. In fact, Maria triggered the longest blackout in U.S. history. Everyone's story is different. Some better, some worse than others. But to truly understand how the island and how Puerto Ricans have changed since then, you want to ask someone who's spent their entire life here. For me, that someone is my uncle, Rafael Cintron, born on the island and here ever since. This is his home.
I miss you.
A home where we shared countless memories, laughs, dozens of meals.
Okay, let's go inside.
But it's also the home where he took shelter from Hurricane Maria.
Very happy to see you again.
Oh my God.
A home we weren't sure would be spared or if he'd make it out of there alive. Does it feel like it's been 5 years?
Han pasado 5 años.
5 years have passed, but a lot of problems remain.
My uncle, like most Puerto Ricans, is bilingual, but more comfortable at times speaking in Spanish.
Porque habían pasado otros huracanes.
We'd faced other hurricanes, and we've suffered through those as well. But Hurricane Maria passed over the entire island. It went straight through the middle, and that's why the disaster and the loss was as much as it was.
The island turned upside down. Those that stayed were scrambling, trying to get the resources they needed to survive several months in their powerless homes.
You'd see all this every day, and you'd ask yourself when. When is this going to end?
My uncle, like so many Puerto Ricans, chose to stay, despite the warnings, despite the dangerous forecast of that hurricane. As we talked about his experience, I realized it's the one question I've never asked him. Why?
I want to live here forever. If I die, well, I want to die here. I want to live through everything that happens in my home, the good and the bad.
It was a risk. Even my uncle knew that. And I remind myself every day how lucky we are that he is okay, that he made it through.
3 years you have to be.
It might be hard to understand, but it's the truth. Some chose to stay for their families, to protect their homes. Others because they simply couldn't afford to flee. Hurricane Maria is the storm no one will ever forget. The storm that's forever changed the lives of Puerto Ricans. The storm that's left many fighting for each and every day.
I want to go home.
People like Angelica.
We've heard nothing.
Like Mayra.
You know, we did what we had to do to survive and to live a peaceful life.
Like Alex.
We are getting exhausted.
Like Roberto. They all have questions, but they all want the same thing. For their island, their paradise, their neighbors, their families, to see a better tomorrow.
And that's why we're here too, to find out why. Why do some areas of Puerto Rico remain almost frozen in time? Why are there still so many people suffering? What's keeping this island from moving forward? And what's it going to take to give Puerto Rico a fighting chance against the next major storm.
Inside the state-of-the-art studio.
We're streaming 24/7 to show you what's happening in real time.
When storms hit, more people watch Fox Weather.
Because when you need reliable information,
you look to the best. And nobody has you covered like Fox Weather.
Because where else could you learn moves like this?
Keep telling yourself that.
Precise, personal, powerful.
From across the country
to just around the corner.
Fox Weather. Stream live now on your favorite device.
It's been 5 long, difficult years for Puerto Ricans, struggling to recover from one of the costliest and deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history. To truly understand the problems they face, you need to venture out across the island, visit different communities that face different challenges. Hidden within the mountains are some of Puerto Rico's smaller, lesser-known communities that are harder to move through. Roads are treacherous, some still badly damaged.
We are heading to the small town of Utuado. It sits essentially in the center of the island here, and it was actually one of the worst off during Hurricane Maria. Now, we're told there are still homes that are using tarps as roofs. It's just how they've been forced to live these last 5 years.
About 28,000 people live in this rural town, surrounded by mountain ranges and tropical forests. You can tell it's seen better days. But among the scars,
let's all come together and make something happen.
A bright staircase that led us to a man with just as colorful a personality.
So I'm trying to figure out how much paint I have and what I could paint.
Alex de Jesus is proud to call Utuado his hometown, and he'll do anything he can to make it look as happy as he remembers it.
The only way for me to do that was to purchase some of the properties, straight from the bank. Everything that you see painted here, everything that you go around, you see beautiful. It's just people like myself.
It's his way of cleaning up the mess Maria left behind, injecting a bit of color and hope to his once decimated street.
This was a disaster. Brown mud with rocks coming down from these stairs. This was a river.
Fast forward 5 years, and unfortunately, things aren't much better.
Right now, this home does not have no electricity and has no water.
Any water he does get comes from a neighborhood pipe or a hose in the street. And it's not much at that.
The bucket is for 2 things. It's mainly for your toilet. The other half you could wash, or it's for cleaning, for mopping,
This has become his everyday routine since returning to Puerto Rico after the storm.
There was nobody here. Even after the 10th day, there was still nobody here.
But after so many years, Alex says there's a common feeling in communities like his, a feeling of neglect, cries for help, for better access, for basic needs. Cries, he says, have fallen on deaf ears.
Us, the people, we just put a bandage. We did what we had to do to survive and to lead, to live a peaceful life. But now we come to a point because a lot of people are tired.
How's everything? It's good. Hanging in there. It was a thriving, happy little town. And what I see of it now, everybody's just in survival mode. It's heart-wrenching because I came back after Maria. It was heart-wrenching to see the difference, even in the mentality of the people in this little town that are just willing to accept anything. If we have a little bit of water rushing, hey, we could take a little shower with that. If we have to take a shower out of a bucket because we haven't had water for 4 days, people don't even complain anymore.
Just across the street, Alex introduced us to Mayra Aquila and her mom, Angelica.
Okay, Mama, don't sit with Frank because she's smaller, you know. Okay.
He's been letting them rent here for nearly a year, much longer than they expected to need the help.
We're going to come check it out.
They were nice to let us stay here because we didn't find a place right away. But I want to go home.
Her home of 30 years was nearly torn apart during Hurricane Maria. Angelica's been waiting years to see it fixed.
They promised this, they promised that, and everything shut. But nobody comes around to say nothing. You call, nobody answers, nobody tells you nothing. It's just like you shut down. Who do we talk to? They can explain to us what's going on.
To try and help get them some answers, the two took us to see their family home for ourselves.
Hey, it's for repair. Come on through. So this is our living room. The whole property had 4 feet of water in every room because the ceiling came down, windows were torn out, trees were busted into the house.
We are surrounded by rotted paneling and sliced walls that just barely hold this place together.
We're going to assume that there's mold in all this.
You'll see patchwork done with the help of neighbors and friends who even used boxes to fill holes in the walls. The little federal aid they did get went towards fixing the roof. Despite its current state, this is home. It's where their memories live, where their family grew, and where they want to stay.
Mayra, my daughter.
It took more than 4 years to finally get the permits and the green light from Puerto Rico's housing department, who's supposed to foot the bill for these repairs with federal grant money. But now, things have changed.
How do you feel now to find out?
What do you think? I cried for days. I'm all depressed. I just don't know. We don't know what we're going to do.
The contractors hired to do the job now claim this home is beyond repair.
So there might be valid reasons why they would not reconstruct this property. Do we know them now as of yet? No. Because they haven't offered us the report. They said we had the right to appeal. We don't know how long that process takes.
And they are not the only ones. More than 17,000 Puerto Ricans have applied for either repair or reconstruction of their homes after Hurricane Maria. But to date, less than 4,000 of them have seen it done.
The little guy like us will still not have a house that we deserved for the money that was supposed to be for us.
They could apply to be relocated, but that could take even more time and force them to give up on the place they've called home for 30 years.
I've been crying so many times. She knows.
So we took their story to New York City to share their case and their struggles with the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
I am David Warrington, Regional Administrator at FEMA Region 2.
That region oversees the ongoing recovery operation in Puerto Rico. Warrington appointed to the new role in April of this year.
So coming in, the portfolio of work is enormous. There is a lot of recovery work still to be done. It's important that the people of Puerto Rico and the public understands that the project is massive.
He says to date, the agency's given the island of Puerto Rico more than $24 billion in aid, but only a fraction of that, about $1.5 billion of that 24, was set aside for individual assistance. And even then, those dollars only go so far.
There are many people who feel like they haven't been able to see the difference that money has made for their lives. What's your response to that?
It's a complicated recovery. It's highly technical. A lot of the stuff that's being rebuilt are not simple projects. They're very complicated. They take a lot of technical engineering expertise. If we just build them back the way they were before, which would be faster, the next hurricane that may come through, we're going to be in the same place that we are in, that we were 5 years ago.
Warrington says FEMA's support isn't meant to make families whole again. It's to get them back on their feet, stabilize their living situation until they find a more permanent solution.
So we're sitting here in limbo all this time.
We don't know what the heck they're doing.
That's where families like the Aquilas are struggling. They have little time and few options left. They can no longer afford rent at the home where we met them, so they might have to move back into this home as is.
If we see another hurricane similar to Maria, do you worry about being in here if that happens?
Yes.
Yes, we worry about being here.
Yes.
And it's not just hurricanes. Puerto Rico has faced and suffered a host of other, sometimes stronger weather events. And experts say there's more to come. It's not a matter of if, it's when they'll strike.
Tracking hurricane season.
I need you to listen up. This one is something we have to watch.
When every moment matters.
Visibility is very low. I just want to show you the power of this wind right now.
We've got you covered.
This is something we are keeping an eye on.
Some of these storms are really going to be fairly intense.
With powerful reporting.
All of this energy making it to the East Coast.
This is where the center of that storm is now.
And precision analysis.
That's the biggest controlling factor in how many hurricanes.
Hurricane season. Stay with Fox Weather for every moment.
I think it's that neighborhood right there. Make a left here.
You find anything about it?
Yeah, this says it happened just after 3.
Is it over?
I mean, it came and went really fast. All the videos I see are less than a minute.
Any idea on like how big or how long it lasted?
Yeah, they're saying it's an EF1.
We were on our way.
I think that was like 2 hours after we landed.
So the day we arrived in Puerto Rico, we heard reports of a tornado hitting a community named Arecibo, the first one to ever hit that town, and so far, the strongest tornado in Puerto Rico's history. So we are driving into the town right now to check on the damage it left behind.
It had been less than 12 hours since the twister when we met with Juan Morales, Arecibo's emergency management director. He tells us they're still working to get the power back on, and meanwhile, cleanup and welfare checks are still happening around us.
So this is one of the homes that's pretty badly damaged. You can take a look at the awning here and pretty much see what's going on.
Esa casa, el símbolo, cayó todo aquí. Fue recogido toda esa área.
So he's saying there was a roof here
Sí.
that was
Entonces-
ripped off and took out this fence right here.
Entonces, al lado de allá hay un par de casas todavía con defectos.
So he's basically telling me that, damage is widespread here. He's talking about roofs from one end of the street landing in another, trampolines, fencing.
Tornadoes are rare for Puerto Rico. In fact, this EF1 is just one of only 22 twisters ever recorded on the island. And while its strength and destruction comes nowhere near that of Maria's, Morales says for some, it feels the same.
Recibió el insumo de esos recuerdos de María.
Reflecting on the feeling of helplessness and uncertainty. It's not just hurricanes they fear, now it's tornadoes too. Back in New York City, Fox weather meteorologists are tracking the tropics, knowing this season we could see anywhere from 3 to 6 major hurricanes.
The odds everywhere are higher, including in Puerto Rico, including in the islands, including on the U.S. coast.
Fox Weather's hurricane specialist Brian Norcross has been forecasting tropical cyclones for more than 50 years.
This is the last 3 hours that we have of radar of Hurricane Maria, because when it came ashore here around Yabucoa in the southeastern part of the island, it knocked the radar off its pedestal, and that was the end of radar coverage over Puerto Rico for the longest time. But they were spread out, look at that, they're spread out in a way that went on across the island. The worst of that hurricane impacted essentially the entire island.
But he believes what made this storm extraordinarily devastating was its timing.
This was toward the end of an unbelievable hurricane season. So, when it was getting started, It was just another storm in a long list that year. I don't think we appreciated at the beginning what it was going to be.
Hurricane Harvey flooded much of the city of Houston less than a month before Maria's impact. And days later came Hurricane Irma, another Category 4 storm that slammed Florida.
There's no question at all that because that hurricane season had one after the other mega disaster, that slowed the process of getting relief to Puerto Rico.
According to FEMA, it took an extra 5 to 7 days to send resources, including food, water, and volunteers, to Puerto Rico after Maria pushed off into the Atlantic. But the worst was far from over. Landslides, more than 40,000 of them, sent mud and dirt off the island's mountain ranges and into homes. Then, after some were just starting to get back on their feet, the earthquake started. Hundreds of tremors, some small, but at least one 6.4 magnitude quake turned homes that survived Hurricane Maria into piles of rubble.
Most hurricanes that come along are survivable. You clean up, you move on, might be months, could take a year, and you hardly recognize that it came by. But sometimes a storm comes and it's so disruptive that it really changes everything.
Especially for an island more than 1,000 miles from the continental U.S. There, hurricanes can lead to severe erosion.
Coastal erosion itself is a natural occurrence, but it's areas like this in Luquillo on the northeast portion of the island that demonstrate the extent of erosion Puerto Rico has faced due to the strength of hurricanes like Maria.
Hurricanes are one of the biggest factors in the changes happening to our beaches.
Maritza Barreto says that erosion is eating away at some of Puerto Rico's only natural barriers. The University of Puerto Rico professor is leading a team of students as they investigate just how much land is washing away. These are some of their latest images showing not all, but many beaches across the island are getting smaller. Some could even disappear altogether. That means anything near the shore, like the San Juan airport, police, fire stations, entire towns even, could be in more danger.
If we see another Category 4 or 5 hurricane, it'll have a greater impact. I would say it could even reach areas that aren't in the flood zone. So we're talking about a population and people who think they're safe, but may not be.
The impact to islands like Puerto Rico goes so far beyond the immediate damage of these weather events. The bigger threat to Puerto Rico then is still its biggest weakness today: access and reliability to one of its most critical resources, power.
Hurricane Maria took out Puerto Rico's entire power grid. It took between 6 to 8 months to get the lights back on for some, and closer to 11 for Puerto Ricans who live in more remote areas. But those fixes were really just bandages holding together not only the outdated system, but decades-old power plants like this. It's not a long-term solution, and Puerto Ricans still say they're seeing blackouts almost every week.
It's what forced many to rely on and cough up thousands for portable generators.
Okay, I want to show you how we live every day, okay?
My uncle Rafael was without power for 85 days after Hurricane Maria.
So that's why I have one that is more powerful than the other.
But even years after the island's grid was restored, it's gone back down more times than he can count.
We turn on this, and because this is more power, we use this to cook, to the water heater, for the air condition.
This powers the entire house?
The entire house.
Okay.
But every 100 hours, we have to change the oil. So that is more money that we need. This one needs 6 gallons of gasoline to fill it. And it's for about 12 hours. We calculated for the 85 days, about $4,000. And that's the price of the gas at that time.
And that number's only going up the more he's forced to use it. is going on? Why are these power outages still happening?
It's the problem that we've been dragging ourselves for a long time. A lot of maintenance that needed to be done, not only at the power plants, but also at the transmission and distribution systems, were not.
Fernando Gil Enseñat is the new board chairman of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, known as PREPA. He was appointed last year after years of blackouts and failures led to its previous chairman's resignation.
It's really difficult for us to have a system that is not according to our date and time. Our generation fleets in general is like 30 years older in average than the generation fleets in the United States.
As is, administrators fear it won't survive another 5 years or another major hurricane.
Just hoping and praying that we're lucky enough this year also not to have another year.
Real progress, he admits, is still years away. Engineers are working on redesigning the island's existing grid and the plants that fuel it to build a more climate-resistant, more sustainable source of power for Puerto Rico.
It's not something that we have a magic wand and in one day we're going to be able to put it, as best as any. It's not replacing and putting the same thing that we had, but to make it better.
So what's left? Waiting, hoping? That hasn't worked. And it's no secret that there's a lot happening behind closed doors. Politics and bureaucracy are creating even more hurdles, all while more weather is on the way. A reality leaving many Puerto Ricans to fend for themselves.
Hello, Fox Weather users. I'm Janice Dean. The Fox Weather app is changing the game with custom features you've got to take advantage of. I'm here to guide you through these features so you can get the most out of your Fox Weather experience. Let me tell you about my favorite feature on the Fox Weather app, Future View. Fox Future View is a feature you can't find anywhere else. With a few simple steps, Future View allows you to track the weather in advance of any big events you have planned for the year. Going on vacation? Booking your honeymoon? Maybe a destination wedding or party? This is the perfect tool to help you plan ahead. Get a future forecast anywhere in the world, nearly a year in advance. Here's how it works. Hit the Plan tab at the bottom of your screen. Then hit Create Event. Give it a name. Let's say Spring Break Trip. Then add a location, maybe to Miami. Pick a start and end date. Add a category, and turn on notifications so we can alert you as your event gets closer. Then click Create. That's it. Give it a try now. This is just one of many great features the Fox Weather app provides to you. This app is full of all kinds of great customizable tools. So dive in and make the Fox Weather app your very own. Fox Weather, precise, personal, powerful.
There's a saying on the island of Puerto Rico,
Water filters.
Solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Only the people save the people. One of those people is Roberto Barrera.
This is batteries, rechargeable batteries. My whole community see on me like some kind of Santa Claus, or Three Kings. They wait for my truck just in case I have something to share with them.
Roberto spends his days driving through some of the most remote areas of Puerto Rico, handing out supplies to families who at times haven't been able to leave their homes to get anything on their own.
What has it been like for you to see this community that you love suffer for 5 years?
It's been very painful to feel that we have been abandoned.
Communities like Utuado have been through horror. Hurricane Maria didn't just destroy homes, it flooded some of the only roads in and out of these mountain towns. Surviving Maria, only to be cut off from the rest of the island.
Living up there is very scary. Very scary. Every time that it starts raining, my body starts shaking because I never know whether I can be able to come down the hill or if I would be isolated all the time.
It's a valid fear, and experts agree it could happen again.
About 40% of the island received rainfall that it had not received ever.
According to University of Texas professor Carlos Ramos Charron, Hurricane Maria is
the greatest event that has been recorded in Puerto Rico.
In terms of rainfall, at least.
10 inches per hour. Rainfall here in Austin, Texas is 35 inches a year on average. So imagine all of that just being dumped in a matter of a few hours.
But next time, it could see even more.
Rainfall associated to hurricanes could increase by 10-15%. That we've proven that it was correct. That happened during Maria. So that projection has already materialized itself, and we see the consequences.
It's why Roberto spends his days handing out those essentials himself, because he knows what it's like not to have what you need in a disaster. It's a testament to that saying, only the people save the people. The ones that remain long after emergency crews head home many times make the biggest difference.
We dedicate ourselves to finding the tools and resources they need to empower their communities.
Cris Marie Cuencas Alamo is trying to do the same. Her work with one of the few nonprofit organizations still around, Puerto Rico Rise Up, is working to eradicate food insecurity.
In Puerto Rico, our agriculture had a big hit.
They've sent out more than 80,000 boxes of food to more than 300,000 people since Maria.
Our community leaders, those are our best allies because we cannot function without them.
People like Cris and Roberto are filling the gap, going where others won't. They're not trained professionals, they're everyday people like you and I who know their island is worth fighting for.
The faces you just saw are the faces of Puerto Ricans helping Puerto Ricans. They all traveled here from different communities across the island to share their stories and advocate for their towns, for their neighbors, many who are still struggling, many who are still asking questions where the agencies they were hoping would bring them that help are. Instead, it's many of these people who are filling that void and doing that important work.
Like building clinics and shelters, work that takes time, sacrifice, and strength. Their strength is inspiring. Truthfully, it broke my heart just to hear how much they've had to sacrifice to try and make it through a single day to make sure their neighbors could too. But it's not a surprise, because if there's one thing Puerto Ricans share, it's love. Love for Puerto Rico. Sadly, there are some who may be doing just the opposite. While on our way back to San Juan,
it's the continuation of our effort, our collective effort, to fight corruption here on the island.
The FBI announced a major arrest of 2 Puerto Rican mayors.
It causes less effective government and less responsiveness to citizens.
Federal investigators said the 2 accepted bribes, tens of thousands of dollars, to choose specific companies for reconstruction work in their cities. One of those mayors, Ray Vargas from the city of Humacao. The town buzzing just hours later. A game on the street turned heated debate.
Si quieren chavo, pues eso es lo que les va a pasar.
Está bien, Pedro, pero no lo van a gestar por santo. Si lo hizo mal, que lo pague.
He just told me he's actually related to the mayor, and he says, well, if he did something wrong, he should pay the consequences.
The now ex-mayor says he's innocent. But he's one of more than 50 people accused of making backroom deals to line their pockets and take advantage of Puerto Rico's challenging situation.
Corruption exists everywhere. It's not just a Puerto Rico problem, it's a capitalism problem. It's a problem necessarily also with disaster capitalism, which is what we're seeing right now in Puerto Rico.
Meet Deepak Lambanieves, the research director at the Center for New Economy. The nonprofit independent think tank has spent the last 5 years working to understand what's behind Puerto Rico's slowed recovery.
First of all, reconstruction processes are normally highly bureaucratic and cumbersome. What we're looking at right now is a recovery that's not even halfway there. It's very much at the starting gates, 5 years in.
They believe Puerto Rico's case is unique.
This comes on the heels of an economic crisis and a bankruptcy process and years of austerity programs being implemented in the island that have set back Puerto Rico's governmental capacity to address many of these crises.
The island's massive debt problem has definitely slowed things over the years, but Puerto Rico's status as a territory also plays a role. While the island is part of the U.S. and Puerto Ricans are citizens, they only have one congressional representative with limited voting powers.
So we find ourselves at a unique moment in history. We need a change in mentality, and that's going to take time. But I think that these disasters are making people wiser and more aware that, help is not going to come from above.
The Fox Weather app.
Make sure your Fox Weather notifications are on.
So much more than a forecast, always accessible.
You need to be watching and making sure that you are prepared.
We got a whole lot to talk about with this system.
Lightning fast, cutting edge, and best of all, tailored to your location and your needs.
We have several days to watch this.
Precise, personal, powerful. Fox Weather. Download the app now and make it your own.
By now, the stories you've heard, the people you've met, have shown you just how trying life on the island can be for Puerto Ricans, even after so many years.
It's been quite a crisis. I think Maria is still here.
Some have lost their homes.
Well, how can you do this to me? You told me my house was going to be repaired.
Some are still finding it hard to access basic needs.
It's the same problem every time we don't have electricity.
And fighting to keep their communities from falling apart.
Even though you have people that wanted to help you, they needed more help.
While no one expects true recovery to happen overnight, or even in a year or two, the people of Puerto Rico feel 5 years is far too long to see so little change.
I think it's accountability. And I think that's the word that we have to look for.
More than 400,000 people have left Puerto Rico in the last 10 years. Many who couldn't afford to repair their damaged homes or couldn't wait around to see if or when real, lasting measures to protect the island will ever come.
Be patient. How can you be more patient?
And as every year passes, the threat of another devastating storm only grows. It's why communities on the island demand to know what their own leaders are doing, to do more than just respond or react when these storms happen. They want to know what they're doing to protect Puerto Ricans today.
Our main goal and role is to foster the ecosystem.
We turn to the one place that promises growth, the Puerto Rico Growth Summit of 2022. where agencies and leaders across the island vowed to share their plans to finally tackle Puerto Rico's hardships.
So thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Manuel Lavoy heads Core 3, an agency created by FEMA after Maria to oversee the island's long-term recovery.
The recovery and reconstruction of Puerto Rico is probably the most complicated, more complex recovery in the whole history of the United States.
He admits that storm was a wake-up call. Its wrath forcing leaders to finally invest and improve its infrastructure, energy grid, and housing inventory.
We know that it took quite some time, a lot of frustration, a lot of processes and requirements. Yes, it happened. Yes, maybe in hindsight we could have done things differently, but the point here is that today there is progress.
Core 3 says they've committed $4 billion of the federal aid given to the island for its recovery to rebuild climate-resistant homes, buildings, and roads with stronger materials and up to code, so they're safer and made to better withstand whatever comes next.
All this coupled with restoring or replacing what Maria damaged together, the ultimate result is a modernized, more resilient infrastructure. It will improve the people's quality of life.
It's a big promise, a big deal for the island. Question is, how much longer will its people need to wait to see it happen?
I have no doubt that Puerto Rico in the next 10 years will be a completely different place from the infrastructure standpoint.
It's really difficult to pick a date and time. Current blue sky state, I think we're there in 5 to 8 years. Another hurricane, another disaster down there could obviously have setbacks, but I do feel confident we're on a really good path going forward.
It's not the answer any of the people we met were hoping for.
People are living the way they are, just like we've been living here the way it is.
But I've always known Puerto Rico to be a place of strength, a force to be reckoned with. And even in catastrophe, the proof is all around us. You can hear it, you can see it, you can feel it. The spirit of Puerto Ricans on display everywhere you look.
Salud. Salud.
The people who still put their heart and soul into everything they do, no matter what the circumstances.
Coconut, beautiful.
El Orgullo Boricua, Puerto Rican pride. It's the fuel that keeps them going and shines through even on the darkest of days. This disaster's proved what Puerto Ricans are truly capable of, the odds they can overcome.
I don't want to go in any place, any country, because I born here and I love my country. And it's for me, I'm satisfied. I'm very happy to be here. And I'm very, very proud to be Puerto Rican.
You've heard it before. Disaster brings people together.
Every day I wake up, I look and I'm like, I'm still one of the luckiest people.
It brought families together. It brought Mayra and Alex together. It brought these volunteers together. It's proof that even in the most catastrophic of days, Puerto Rico can rise above.
The most important thing is never lose the faith, because better days come.
No matter how long it takes, because they know their home is worth it.
I say through all this, this is still my paradise. I will never give up hope on our island.